Thank you, patient, wonderful guests and Justine Toms. We've had trouble this morning, and what else is new? My old computer is what we are on today, and I thank you for joining us, and I thank you for join on Zoom and putting in the link. I had gone to my new computer, which allowed me to just give you a clickable link, but that clickable link did not work. And so with that, I'm going to say, God works in mysterious ways. What is the reason that this was delayed today? What is it about delay? And what is it about our world today? You just want everything to work the minute you touch it. And it doesn't work the minute you touch it sometimes. And so it's interesting to have this wonderful, most of all, they taught me happiness, the book by Robert, who always said everything is a gift and everything is a miracle. So let's see what the gift is today for this delay as we look at my beautiful guest today. Justine Toms is also one of the special people on our planet. Her message goes worldwide on New Dimensions Radio. She is allowed to speak to some of the Nobel laureates, some of the people who are working for peace, and many of the people you're reading in your daily logs. These are the people who are going to bring our planet into harmony. And Justine has a very special way of doing that. I asked her how she was able to talk so well to so many different people. And she said, I come from love. I love the people. They say they learn from me, but I learn so much more from them. When Robert was interviewed by Justine Toms and Michael Toms at that time, Michael was her husband who started New Dimensions with Justine. And when she was there with me in the waiting room, in the green room, all of a sudden, I saw Robert change. I saw how he was able to bring his passion for life to the audience through the questions that Michael Toms asked. Justine is shaking her head because she has that same gift. They worked together. They worked together in a harmonious couple. They became one. They started New Dimensions together. When Justine met him, and this is the story I want to share with you someday, she said it was like a magnet. She was drawn to him, and they became partners, and she'll tell you how long they were partners. And so as we sat there in the green room and we watched Michael telling Robert and Robert telling Michael their story of their life and the story of happiness and the story of peace. And as they talked, the whole audience that was there, the person who was in the technical office, the person who was outside the booth, we all were just mesmerized by the words that were coming from these two Nobel people. I think you'll find that as you listen to Justine today. And as I was rereading, most of all, they taught me happiness, I realized how many times did Robert say the word love? How many times did Robert begin to tell that love is the answer? And when I asked Justine what was her magic, that was her word, love. How many times in this book, most of all, they taught me happiness, did Robert mention the word happiness? It was like a passion for love and happiness. If we have that on the planet, all good will happen. That's my theory. And I reread every one of his words. And I said, how did I not remember all of these? That's because we have to remember to read again, to look again at what we have seen before, to pay attention to what we have seen before. And when you hear somebody like Justine Toms, you begin to let it go into your soul. You hear these words and you become that magician that allows you to take them into the world for others to hear and to believe. And with that, I'm going to start our Peace Book Club today. We're going to go through chapters that include pages from 47 to 103. Recently, David Wick, who's going to introduce our next section, had the brilliance to invite Justine to speak to our Rotary E-Club of World Peace. I could not believe that I was looking at this wonderful woman again, who I had seen so many years ago. And now David said, yes, he will be our next speaker. I'll share a little more about him at the end. But Justine, may I just say welcome and welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
It's my honor. My honor. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here.
Justine has a way of remembering Robert. So let's start with that. What do you remember about Robert? Now, we've all read these pages between 47 and 103, so we're kind of familiar with what he's saying. But what is it about Robert? As you mentioned in our Peace podcast, she's number 109. Can you imagine? She's our 109th Peace podcast. So if you really want to hear more about Justine, go to peacepodcast.org and go to 109, and there's Justine. But what did you tell me about Robert that was so impressive about him and your relationship with him?
Well, thank you so much, Barbara, for having me here and just taking me back to those special moments with Robert. And one of the most special that I is so imprinted on my soul is a moment with Robert. We are sitting together on a bench and we're overlooking the University of Peace in Costa Rica. And as we're sitting there, I don't remember what we talked about, but I just remember the feeling of just calmness and just radiant love and expectancy and just all these good feelings and every once in a while, and as we all read about in that chapter, I think was Leonardo's notebook or something, what was the chapter that Robert talks about how when he got that book from that young man in Iowa, I think, about Leonardo da Vinci, he found out that Leonardo walked around with a notebook all the time. And so we're all privileged to have all of those writings and drawings from Da Vinci that are so special. But also Robert, then he had carried that notebook around with him all the time too. And so we were sitting on the bench and every once in a while he'd pull it out and he'd write something down. And I don't know what he wrote, but it felt so special to just be sitting with this wisdom person, this instigator of maybe what John Lewis would say, good trouble, that he just really, he just exuded, he was at one with his thoughts and his feelings and his love for the planet. He was, I guess I would say, some of us live as a divided soul, and he was not divided at all. He was at one with his intention, with his values, with his love, with his actions. They were all one piece. And I just am so grateful for what he has he's left a huge legacy. And I'm so grateful for you, Barbara, that you carry on that legacy, that you are holding it, that you're making it available continually. And it is what I call timeless wisdom. It has no time. It's something we need to hear over and over and be inspired by over and over. And just, I was so grateful to just go into the book and start reading again his works. And I was reminded when that first chapter, he's talking about being on the train and that he had nothing to read. And he talked about reading and how it's really good to just sort of set that aside. And I'm reminded of how I do my interviews. When I was reading that and I was thinking, golly, when I do an interview, and if it's someone who has written a book, I will read that book all the way through from page 1 to page umpteen, whatever. And I'm a slow reader. Michael, my late partner and husband and co-founder of New Dimensions, Michael was a speed reader. he could just sort of go right through things. Well, not me. My process is much slower. But when I read what Robert, or Robert, as Barbara calls him, Robert has written, it reminded me of my own process. And when I read a book, I usually, when I'm preparing for an interview, I do it at my computer. And I have an app on my computer called Dragon. And Dragon is where I use my microphone and I talk into my microphone, and it automatically transcribes what I'm saying. So it's really a great transcription application. And so what I found, what Robert helped me to see, is that I'm already in dialogue with my guest as I'm reading the book. Because it's not just that I'm reading the book, I'm also processing it and talking back to the author right there. The dialogue has begun, because in my notes, I'll have maybe highlight something that they have said, and then I'll have my comment about that. So I am starting that interaction even before we get to meet on air. It was just a great reminder of my own process and how I go forward with it. But I'm just reminded of what Robert talked about in that moment. That particular chapter, I think, was really significant in the whole book, because he said there were two seminal moments in my life, just when he was riding on the train, and later in India when he was riding on a bus. And both of those moments were seminal because he allowed his mind to wander. He didn't bring a book and just or watch a video, is what some of us might tune into YouTube or something, or whatever we're doing, or listening to a book on audio. But he just let his mind wander. And I think he used the phrase, it's like a butterfly. And you get the image of just letting the mind wander like a butterfly and noticing where it lands. And in that way, he allowed himself to really think about it. It landed on that place where there was Paul Bancourt had suggested that people write. He invited somebody to who I don't know who he invited, but Robert got the invitation, and he remembered the invitation about what do you think of a world government, and how would you tell the UN how to run the world toward peace and justice, and that was the launching pad. That was a liminal moment, a moment when he grasped that and he followed through, and it started him on his. I think of it like, all right, here's the analogy I have. All right, this goes back to a folktale of Jack and the Beanstalk. And you remember in Jack and the Beanstalk, his mother had him go out to sell the cow. And he comes back with these magic seeds, or what he thought would be magic seeds. And he gets home, and his mother is livid. She says, "You did what, Jack? What did you do? You brought home these senseless seeds." And I remember the poet Robert Bly telling this story. And he said, Jack's mother was not a new age mother. In other words, she didn't go, "Oh, Jack, you brought these seeds. Well, that's wonderful. Let's just put them in this jar, this special jar, and let's put them up on the mantelpiece. And what you did was fine. And even though we're starving, it's okay, all that you're doing." No, his mother was not like that at all. She said, "What?" And she took those seeds and she threw them out the window, and they took root. And Jack then began this huge beanstalk. It was so huge. It was bigger than a tree. I mean, huge. And he decided he was going to climb that beanstalk. And that took him on his adventure to finally find the golden goose. And so I am reminded of Robert and being on that train and allowing his thoughts to just wander until it lands on that beanstalk. And he climbs that beanstalk. He writes that essay. He wins that essay. He ends up in the UN. I mean, it's just like, what do we know about our lives? I think if we just sort of stay curious about, well, I wonder how this is going to turn out when we see that beanstalk, when we see that it's a time when we allow ourselves the space to just allow our mind to wander and let it land lightly like that butterfly on a flower. It's an embryonic time. It's a time when the possibility of our creativity is heightened. It's a time when we can, and Robert talks about this in later chapter. He talks about it's a time when we are connecting with what I call the infinite intelligence of the universe. Some might call that God. And this reciprocal energy that we are embedded in. And it's not like it's up in the sky and, we're going to be downloaded. It's not that at all. It's like we are immersed in this energetic, creative, reciprocal, collective intelligence. And when we allow ourselves to relax enough to get the signals and then act on them like Robert did, he wrote the essay. He actually then did something. So an action. And I think also in the notebook that he also had and held all for so long, all of his, his adult life, he was doing that. And that for me is the first lesson of manifestation. That here we are, we've allowed ourselves to be open in our mind, our consciousness. We're getting in touch with that greater intelligence, with that infinite intelligence. And then we get something that's uniquely ours, some message, some notice, and we write it down. And that's the first act of manifestation, I believe. And I'm always encouraging people, when you get some sort of flash, you may not know what it's going to be. You won't know its outcome. It's not fully formed at all, but it's just like a little flash. You write it down, and that is the first. That's like that beanstalk, that first moment, that beanstalk, the little green shoot is starting to show. And you don't know what it's going to look like. Is it going to be a tree? Is it going to be a flower? Is it going to be a a mushroom? Is it going to, what, you don't know what it's going to look like, but that's that first step. Write it down. And that's my experience. And so I too I'm not so good at actually having the notebook right by my hand, but I keep a little notebook in my purse, and I have notes on my desk. So I try, and I have a notebook in my bedroom. So I'm a little more discombobulated than Robert, because I have notebooks kind of everywhere, but I try and write them down because I am constantly praying I know that I'm getting signals all the time from the universe. I know that for sure in my life. So what I pray for is, help me pay attention to the signals. Help me tune in to that radio wave, to the right station, to the station I need to hear right now. Because those signals, I think that we're all getting signals all the time. And it's really important to just sort of take the time, not sort of, to actually take the time and jot a few notes and let that start to grow like a garden. So that's pretty much. I also thought, if I can just kind of wander. Can I wander? Is it okay if I just kind of wander a bit here? Yes. I'm just thinking about, when I read that part, it reminded me of an interview that we did years ago with Leonard Schlein, who was a medical. He was a surgeon, but he wrote several books, wonderful books. And one of the books was about The Goddess and the Alphabet, I think was the name of it. And it's the first time, and this goes along with what Robert was talking about, it was the first time that I had ever heard about writing, and how when the written word first came in, we're talking about maybe the 11th century before BC. That's when those early tablets, Sumerian tablets, and the Phoenicians started using these letters. And that's when the tablets first started to appear. And then that developed into written language. And then pretty soon it was, published language and all of that. And Leonard talked about how that kind of reading in the alphabet really started getting us into our which part of the brain? It's the left brain, the rational, the part of our brain that quantifies things and counts things, and it's a good part of the brain. We get a lot done. It calculates, it categorizes, and it's logical, and that's a good part. But he's saying that reading puts us in that part of our brain, whereas the oral tradition, we're using the right brain. And he also said how the oral tradition passes wisdom down more accurately. Now, let me just more accurately think about that. Like, I've up until that point of hearing that, I thought, oh, wait a minute. If it's written down, then we know what it was said in. That's like a legal document, and it can't be questioned because it's there in print, so it's true. And he said, no. He said it's open to all. Written word is open to all sorts of interpretations. I mean, just think of all the different interpretations of the Bible. I mean, the different viewpoints, and how people say this phrase meant this, or that scripture meant this, and it goes on infinitum. But the wisdom, when it's passed down orally from wise elder to the next generation and the next generation, it keeps a kind of integrity of inflection and of heart and soul. And it just blew my circuits open when Leonard Schlein talked about this and shared this. And I'm just thinking, I'm seeing David Wick, and David and I were part of a 5-year gathering, peace building for the 21st century gathering of incredible people that we just would meet twice a year for a week at a time, and it was all done orally. It wasn't written down. We were sharing orally, and in some ways that those meetings still live inside of me in a way that the written word just hasn't quite landed. So these were some of the thoughts that I was having as I was reading what Robert said about just letting the mind wander and not having to fill it up with books or videos and all of that, and just give it a moment. And yeah, so any comment on that? I'm going to pause for a moment and just because I've been going on and on.
No, you haven't been going on and on. You've been sharing exactly what Robert did. And he wrote in one of those chapters that you were reading that in the morning, before he hops out of bed and gets going, he lets his mind wander. And he said he doesn't write down a thing. He just lets his mind wander until it lights on something. And he says he knows that whatever he thought of in those early morning hours would become something real as he was at the United Nations, as he lived his day. These thoughts would come back to him. And so I have to agree 100% with what you said about the voice and the oral history and us sharing through our voice. I think our voice is a record of what's going on in past centuries, past times. And I think we, if we're open to it, can translate it so people can hear it again.
Right. I agree, Barbara. I agree. It's the voice has such a special quality to it that's beyond the rational. You know, it's something else where we're touching each other in such a deep way, because it's not just using the eyes. Although when we're together, we are using our eyes. We see each other, how our body is reflecting the words, and we see it in our eyes. We see it in the tone. We're hearing it. It's just kind of surrounding us in a way that's so perfect. And when he was writing about that, it reminded me of Michael, my dear partner. And Michael went through Catholic schools all the way through through high school or prep school, and he had the nuns, and then he had the Jesuits, and he told Father Matthew Fox one day, he said, "Well, Matthew, I'm a recovering Catholic," is what he said. And Matthew had not heard that word. And I know one of his books, I think Matthew's book on Thomas Merton, he wrote a dedication, and he used Michael and wrote a dedication to Michael as a recovering Catholic. And Merton was very, very special to Michael. And something about Thomas Merton, what he did and why Michael loved him so much, was that he went beyond Catholicism. He didn't abandon it, but he included the thoughts of the East, like Buddhism. He met the Dalai Lama and Zen, and he just he was expanding his viewpoint, and he never stopped and just sort of set up his tent someplace, but he kept growing, as did Robert. And I was thinking about Michael, about the early morning, and what Michael would do. Often he would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, And he once told me why he did that. He said, it's because I want to get in tune with all the monks and all the nuns who are getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to pray and contemplate quietly. And that reminded me, like, it's like Robert getting up for the sunrise in that quiet morning is, again, that liminal space, that creative space that is uncluttered by all the busyness that later comes into our day. So I was thinking about that at the time, and how the other chapter that I loved that I was reading was a chapter on encouragement. I love that because I think that is so necessary right now at this time. I mean, I'm thinking if I'm so exasperated with the media news these days. I mean, I think it's really important that we hear about, the devastation of huge tornadoes right now that are happening like in a time of year that they've never happened before or rarely happened before, and the droughts and the mass murders and all of this that's happening, from the climate to how badly some people are acting and the devastation. Oh, yeah, I could go on and on. But the problem is they don't put it in a context that offers us any encouragement. So I'm just starting to turn it off. I figure I'm going to hear what I need to hear. I'm going to, if something important happens, I'll get the news without having to just have it beating me up day in and day out. And so that and I loved Robert's image. I thought this was so perfect, his image. He said, okay, if you have a broad ditch of water and your child is on the other side of the water and you want that child to leap over and join you, if you say to your child, oh, you can do it, you're so strong, you have accomplished this before, and you can now do it, and all that encouragement, and that child is going to be able to jump over that ditch and join you. But if you say to that child, you're such a weakling, and this ditch is so broad and it's muddy and slippery on that side, and you're going to lose your footing, and you're going to, just, I hope we didn't lose Barbara. Okay.
Oh, no, we're here.
Okay. My screen just switched somehow. Anyway, that if you discourage it, the child will never try and jump. And it's kind of the way there is a billboard somewhere, I don't remember where I saw it, this huge billboard that someone put up that just was saying, oh, the UN is just a terrible thing and we shouldn't participate with it and we shouldn't join it because it's just not doing anything. And that's the same thing as the ditch. It's like, wait a minute, things are not perfect. Things are not, manifesting maybe at the timeline we want it. Maybe we want it to go this way or that way, but it is functioning. It continues on as a viable place for worldwide dialogue. And that is happening for sure. It does so much good in the world when you look at UNICEF or you look at, the Commission on the Status of Women and, on all of this. So anyway, I think he's right about that, about giving us encouragement because
that is probably something that is more important than anything else you've said today. If we can encourage people to pay attention encourage people to use the gifts that they have. Just think how everything would change, because the opposite just doesn't enable people to live the destiny they were born with. And that word encouragement is so beautiful. I thank you for saying that. Robert was a great encourager. He would write love letters to me that encouraged me to fall deeply in love with him. He was just one of those encouragers. No matter what he wrote, he would write something that would make you feel bigger than you were. As I read his words, I begin to see, well, he had a message there for all of us, not just me, but for the world. And it's just such a privilege to hear you say that word. And I think encouragement is probably one of the words that we need to keep with us at all times. Encourage those who are in your life to whatever you see them doing. If they're doing something well, thank them and be encouraging. David, your hand is up. I'm going to call on you. David Wick is going to take us through the next go round on June. I think the date is going to be June 4th. We're going to have David Wick, and David Wick is a very special man. This whole next section is about learning from others. David Wick is past president of the Rotary E Club of World Peace, founder of the Pathways to Peace. Think about those words. Rotary E Club of World Peace, Pathways to Peace, Pathways to Peace. And with Avon and all the others, the Tezes and the Dot Mavers and the Justines. David, what was your question for today? David Wick.
Well, just a reflection, as Justine was talking about what some of the things that she received from this reading, which is wonderful. And one that stood out for me is the chapter, the last palm leaf on the bottom of page 102, where, and also throughout, Robert is highlighting his gratitude to his grandfather and to his father, and for their being exemplary in their way of life and approaching life and being upbeat and in the happiness that is. This is what he learned from them, and I think this is really a summary of what he's talking about. I'll just read it. It just says, "All we can do is to put our full love into our lives, professions, and families, making a work of art of the few precious years that are granted to us." It's like that really is the focus of what he's talking about. Make the work of art of all parts of our lives, whatever we're doing, and take that as a gift. So I think that was really a significant, profound comment.
And his grandfather, he would often talk about his grandfather, because his grandfather was so able to not have a bias about anything. He said he never told me any lies because he had no reason to tell me any lies. But he said he taught me so much just in our conversation. That goes back to what Justine and I've been saying about our voice. His grandfather was handing down the wisdom he had gained through his long life, and how important it was that Robert was spend time with him. Robert always said to me, "I love old people because they know so much." And so he was such a passionate person for old people. The minute we saw an old person, he'd go over and talk to them. "And can I sit down with you? I'd like to hear a few things you learned in your life." Not only was he a wisdom keeper, but he learned from those he was with. And I'll never forget him saying, "My best education happened at the United Nations." That's where I learned about the world and what I needed to do to be part of the evolution and the encouragement our planet needs. And just what you said, Justine, about encouraging the United Nations. If we could just get that in our heads, that we need to encourage not only ourselves, but institutions and people. Recently, in fact, I just got it yesterday, I read an article in Westways magazine, and it was talking about the ice cream man, how important it was for this young man. I sat down immediately and I wrote a letter. Yes, the ice cream man not only brought us ice cream, he brought us community. The minute we heard his jingle when I was a little girl, all the kids in the neighborhood came out, and we became a community of children. And we would sit on the beautiful curb and eat our ice cream and plan what we were going to do. I wanted people to remember children didn't always have iPhones. Children had ways of being together with their ice cream, and they didn't have freezers. The lady across the street had an ice box. She didn't have a freezer. So Helen would come across with me and we'd buy an ice cream and sit on the curb and plan what we were going to play. We need to go back to those times when we were all important. And so he printed my letter in this magazine. And I said to my son, who happened to bring me the Westways magazine, look, your mom's in the letters to the editor. And he said, well, you have a lot of wisdom, Mom. And I said, well, thank you, Dave. I said, no, this is going back to a time when I was really happy to be a child. My mother didn't know where I was half the time because I was out playing with my friends.
Yeah.
But she knew when it was dinner time, I'd show up. And sure enough, I did. Jerry, I see your hand. What would you like to offer today for our betterment of our wonderful Peace Community Magazine group?
First of all, I'd like to say that I am the recipient of a miracle. So I was having a lot of trouble reading, and this is what I do all the time. And 2 days ago, I had cataract surgery. And yesterday morning, for the first time in I don't know how long, I read the newspaper without glasses.
Oh,
And the world is so full of brightness.
congratulations.
So it was there. So I thought I would share with you that, Barbara, that I told you how apprehensive I was. So I wanted to start there. But I think the biggest miracle in all this thing is Robert himself and how he makes you feel. And I think that you were kind of getting it at that, Justine. You know, you were talking about your own feeling. Next Friday, Robert will be around the world in 62 countries, talking to everyone about his legacy, full of substance. See, Robert wandered, but he always have a destination, because somehow he came up with this wisdom at the end of the wander. A lot of us don't ever get there, but he seemed to get there. Well, this beautiful interview that you have given us, and the surround that we're using, and the music, will be presented to the world, and it will be sent next Friday.
Beautiful.
And Barbara, we ask that you send it to everybody, or anybody who wants it, who isn't already on our list, should just send us their email, and we will put them on our list, and they will receive not only Robert.
Yasmin, tell the group what it is that Jerry's talking about, where they can view Robert next Friday.
Yeah, this is what we're doing through the Visioneers is putting out 10 episodes of wisdom. And we've already heard from people like Irvin Laszlo and Jane Goodall and Bill Halal and Gene Houston and people like that. And this is episode 7, and this is Robert. And we're positioning Robert in this episode as the embodiment of everything that the others have been saying, because they're all talking about the need for global consciousness, planetary citizenship, and so on. And here we have a man who was all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way we're presenting it. And we are very indebted to Barbara for giving us this wonderful interview that was done, I think around 1999, somewhere in there, by Chantel Westerman. And she's just a lovely person and a wonderful interviewer. And between the two of them, there was just sort of
A chemistry.
chemistry, magical chemistry came out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a lovely experience. So that's what we're sharing next Friday on our wisdom episode. And we're just so delighted that we can be doing
I
that.
will send it to all of the people who have signed up for the wisdom of this Peace Book Club. And I will send it to you as soon as Jerry and Jez send it to me. You know, Wisdom Media was an old fashioned way of having wisdom keepers be interviewed and put on TV. And those people found Robert and they said, it is time for us to interview Robert. And Chantel, I think this is one of her last interviews she's done, Des. And she did because wisdom, they stopped the interviews. And when I sent it to you and you said it was perfect, I was so delighted. Jim Halderman, I see your hand is up, please.
Well, one of the things that I'm hearing in Justin's great words and everybody else's, and it's something I try and teach in my classes, love is infectious, and how it but it's far more than that. Our entire presence 100% of the time is either building a relationship or damaging a relationship. And I have to remind myself at times to bring myself back into that moment. What am I sharing in this moment? And what am I sharing? And of course, 100% of our emotion is expressed on our physiology 100% of the time. So I need to check. But the good news is it causes me, whenever it gets tough and I'm getting in doubt, you know, I think of this book. I think of Robert. I think of that pilot that landed an airplane safely in the middle of the river and everybody walked away. He could only have done that by being in that presence moment, fully in that presence. And that's what Robert did when he walked down the stairs and walked out and he said, oh, that man, he's up there. And that takes that mental attitude and that ability. And so 100% of the time, let's remind ourselves and ask ourselves, what is the aura we're giving off right now? And
what a beautiful statement, Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, and what are your thoughts now, Justine?
Well, I'm just swimming with so many thoughts that I'm just so excited by this group. You're just really stimulating me, and with some of the things that I wrote down. Thank you, Jim. You talked about love, and as I think of it as a positive virus, and it reminds me of the work of David Loy, who works with Rian Eisler, and he really studied Darwin, and he said, like, Darwin's references in all of his writings, he talked about love. Like they're like something, he counted them up, 93 references, if I remember correctly, about love and how the evolution of humanity and life on the planet is about love. And he talked about maybe the fittest, whatever it was called, whoever was the fittest was the winner. He only talked about that about twice. And, there it was right there. So I'm reminded of that. And then there's something else I wanted to say when we were talking about gratitude and encouragement. And I'm remembering an African saying, and this has to do with when I encourage people to get together in circles and have really circles of friendship where we can be encouraging others to be to live in our fullness, that we really, really encourage each other in the genius that we truly are, because we can tap into that genius. And I know Robert said, hey, it's not me. I'm tapping into this collective. And I feel that's true, but we are all have that potential. And the African saying, and this has to do with encouraging one another, it's how we hold each other, and it goes like this, like it's about someone who actually knows your song and sings it to you when you've forgotten it. And they're not fooled by the mistakes or the failures and the way we beat ourselves up. They're not fooled by that, those images that we hold of ourselves when we get into regret or worry. And here's what they say. They say, we will remember your beauty when you feel ugly, your wholeness when you are broken, your innocence when you feel guilty, and your purpose when you are confused. So that's like that encouragement that we hold for each other. I hold your beauty when you are feeling really ugly, or I remember your purpose. I remember your assignment, your personal assignment, which is one filled with joy and love and genius. I will remember that for you when you fall out and you say, oh, I'm not accomplishing anything, I'm just a failure. So that's where we hold each other in this way, that it's really about being each other's, well, I call Barbara a world cheerleader, because I think of Barbara, really, she is a huge encourager. I mean, whenever I'm around you, Barbara, I just feel encouraged to keep on going and keep giving my whatever piece it is that I'm to give here. So, it's like we all become each other's cheerleader. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I love this piece book club, because we get to hear you tell us that we're on the right track, that we are encouraging each other to believe that peace is possible. It's what we think that the world is that becomes what the world is. If only we knew how many miracles we have every day, we would be like Joyce Wyckoff, in total gratitude. She has the gratitude journal, the gratitude mojo journal. She's brought gratitude back into its proper place. We need to be in constant gratitude. And Robert always was. He was in constant love, constant gratitude. And those hours in the morning, I knew better than to say, well, let's go eat breakfast. I didn't say a word. That's how we got 7,500 ideas and dreams. We have to have the patience with our partners to let them become who they are. And I think that's our magic in a couple. If you can be more of who you are in the couple, and if you can help your partner be more than who he or she is, then all of a sudden we all become miracle makers. Right, Justine?
Right. And, the other thing that popped out for me in the readings was when Robert was asked about how he did his work, and he said, well, it's all about loving your profession. And that reminds me of a story I learned years and years ago. And it was about a toll taker in, those little booths when you're driving across, let's say, a bridge. And in the Bay Area, you're driving across the Bay Bridge that goes from the East Bay, from Oakland and Berkeley to San Francisco. We call it the Bay Bridge. So we're going across the Bay Bridge, and you stop. Nowadays, it's all automatic, so you don't have it. But you used to have to stop and pay the toll. You give a quarter to a toll taker, a person who was enclosed in this little glass booth. And this person was there all day long. And there was this one guy, he was just so joyful. He just loved his job, just absolutely loved his job, even though it was very repetitive and he was taking this money from all of these people. And finally somebody wrote this up in one of our newspapers. Somebody asked him, how do you stay so happy all the time? it was, I think the name of the article was The Dancing Toll Taker, I think was the name of the article. And he said, oh, it's easy. Look at my job. I get to see this wonderful skyline every day, and I see the sunrise, and I get to meet all these people who come through, and I get to dance all day long because he actually would dance within this little booth. He was always moving and dancing, and so I was remembering this story when I thought of Robert talking about the love your profession, no matter what it was. You think that this would be just the most dull profession in the world. And it's like that. It's a reminder of loving what we're doing. I know that Michael and I wrote a book about doing what you love and loving what you're doing. It's called True Work. And it's really about that, about being so present with our task that it's nothing but joyful, because it just is, again, going back to gratitude, because we're alive and we're able to do it. We're alive and we have the facility to move our body, to write it down, or to sing it, or to serve meals, or whatever it is, or to sweep the floor, or to do the dishes, whatever it is. It's like, wow, we are here doing this. And I also think of this idea about people get into worry or get into depression or whatever. It's like, wait, this planet that we're on, this manifestation, this incarnation that each of us are, we're born maybe on the universe's vacation planet. Maybe, and this is not some sort of galactic penal colony. This may be our time out to have fun and to have joy, and to spread that around, and to not let that other virus of depression and how bad things are, but to join with, call in Robert's energy and saying, yeah, this is a joy. I am here. I'm able to manifest something good in the world. And I am so grateful that I'm joined by so many others. Yeah.
That is such a beautiful statement. I'm just putting us on gallery view, because every one of us would just like to take you home and keep you. You are something very special. My goodness, Justine, I look at you and I think of all the people you've interviewed and how you bring them up at exactly the right moment. She's been doing this since 1973 with Michael. And that means that we have a heck of a lot of wisdom captured by this beautiful couple. And now she has the archives where you can go and listen. How would we do that, Justine? Just so people can.
Right. We have like over 8,000 hours of interviews, of these deep dialogues with so many people that have been mentioned, like already, like the Jean Houstons and the others that have been mentioned by the Jim, who I'm not Desmond, or I'm not sure your
Desmond
name.
And Jerry Bergdorfer.
Jerry, and we have a project that we're digitizing some of the older analog programs, and you can go to the website. We have about, I think, 1,800 programs that you can download from the website, newdimensions.org, and just go and put in, you can put in Robert, you can put his name in there, and that interview with him will crop up where you can download it, or anybody else, that you've mentioned. And I was curious about visionaires. I was curious, Is that something that John Ratz is part of? Does that name ring a bell?
I think it's new. They're in Canada, and you
Oh,
can
okay.
engineers, and you can find out all about them.
Okay, great. Okay.
It's going to be.
'Cause
I know Jerry and Des. They'll be in touch with you. And
Okay,
it's
great.
Justine at newdimensions.org. And so when you and Jim Halderman will probably have you on his wonderful. Everybody on this podcast today, everybody on this Peace Book Club is distinguished. I just interviewed Tom English. Tom English, raise your hand above the palm tree. I just interviewed him. He's on a Peace podcast. I've had every one of you on a Peace podcast. You are miracle makers. Sandy creates the most amazing websites. If you ever want a website, call Sandy Hinden. Raise your hand. Let's see you. He's doing Peace Polls right now. Jim Halderman has once a month with fabulous speakers. In fact, who's coming up next, Jim? I read somebody. Who is it?
Somebody you know quite well. His name is Sandy Hinden.
I didn't want to say it, but I knew you were going to interview him. And Jez and Jerry, you have to have on your program too, Jim. They are brilliant. Tammy hasn't been on your program. Once a month, he does an interview program. The one that he did with me, I put on my blog. It was so beautiful. Justine, every one of these people you're looking at are miracle makers. And I just am so grateful. Joni started Pathways to Peace with David Wick. Tammy has a monthly meditation right after the first Monday of the month. And Judith Harris is my partner in UNA USA. She keeps me on my toes. And Rosemary keeps Eleanor in Costa Rica on her toes. And Rosemary's in Costa Rica, keeping the joy. And as I mentioned before, Joyce Wyckoff and her gratitude. Oh my gosh. If you saw her Gratitude Mojo book or her smaller book that my sister says, I only want to write for 3 minutes. I don't want to write for a whole page. So she gets the Gratitude Miracles. Is that the name of the book, Joyce?
Yes, it is.
Okay. She has Gratitude Miracles. That's where I started. When you take the moment to write your gratitude, when you take the moment to encourage another, what does it do to you? It allows you to be more than you thought you could be. Encouraging others gives me so much joy. That's why I started Peace Podcast after Robert passed away, because I knew that not only did Robert have wisdom, but all of you, Joni, hi, all of you who are looking at me have wisdom beyond. And we're just so grateful. So with that, please join us on June 4th for Peace Book Club. And we're going to go through the next chapters of what we learn from each other. And when I was reading yesterday, I read everything Robert wrote. I keep finding myself going back to. I turn off the television, I turn off everything, and just go back to reading. So Jerry, I'm so glad your eye's perfect, because I know you're a reader too. And so we look at each other and we say, how grateful I am that you're in my life. How grateful I am that you put up with technology today and still showed up. How grateful I am that we had Justine Toms. When the first time I heard Justine was maybe before you all were born, because she and I go way back. And
We
yet
do.
she never, ever changes her story. It's always about you, encouraging you to tell your story. And today we got to hear what she keeps in her heart. And I'll never forget Robert. He said, Justine has the perfect face. And I said, yes, it's a round face. She knows so much. And I would say, how do you know that? Did you read that chapter?
Yes, about the faces, about the caricatures, and the Owen wrote about that. Oh, that was fascinating.
And so when Robert met you, we were in the car driving home, and he said, doesn't she have the perfect face? And I said, well, you were being interviewed by Tom. Well, he's okay, but doesn't she have the perfect face? So you see, he knows, he knew. He said when people came to his office, he would sit there a minute and just study them, because he knew there was something they were bringing, and he didn't want to hear their words per se. He just wanted to study them. And I said, well, is that why you fell in love with me? He said, oh, no, you were too beautiful. So I thought I'd just better pay attention. I said, Robert, you know there's more here than that. And so anyway, we had 17 fabulous years. And I thank my son. This is a special moment. He republished Robert's book from 1978. And that's why we all have Most of All, They Taught Me Happiness. It was my son and his girlfriend who republished it. Joyce, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just had a possible suggestion. This is such an interesting group, and we're getting closer to the end of the book. And I was wondering if we could have just a few minutes, maybe toward the end of the next meeting, to everybody, maybe just say or read one sentence or one small thought that they've gotten from the book.
Well, we could even do that now if you want to stay on, because like I was looking at the book, and as I read on laughter, I was reading "A day without laughter is a lost day," so I underlined it. Or the human body is made up of trillions of cells, delicate computers, all bound together by marvelous unexplained force of life. But it's laughter that makes the day. And I underlined that. Does anybody else want to read a line that they underlined? Tammy, are you having a line that you underlined? Because I love that, Joyce. In fact, I was thinking, tell us, Joyce.
I'm not ready to do it because I haven't picked my thing. And I thought, because now we have a whole month until the next one, we could be ready.
Maybe we could, David, what do you think? At the end of next month? Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah, very, very definitely. I mean, and that's the point is, learning from each other. That's what the focus is.
That's something.
So this is a perfect way of learning from each other.
Joyce, I don't mean Joyce, I mean Justine.
Here's a sentence. To promote peace breeds peace. We each have the choice between being a creator or destroyer, an agent of beauty, peace, human faith, and happiness, or spreader of conflict, pessimism, and mortality and discontent. So that was where he was saying, hey, peace breeds peace. We have the choice of being a creator and an agent of beauty, peace, human faith, and happiness.
It's amazing. I could not believe how much I was underlining. I couldn't believe how much I was circling. And I saw your hand, Jim Halderman, then I lost you. Okay, maybe he'll come back on. Tammy, did you want to read something?
No, my comment was just what you said. I have underlined so much in the book I can hardly find. So, and I'm like Joyce. I need little time to digest and see what really pops out.
Well, it was amazing, amazing how much I was able to relive with Robert, to reread. Now, I read this book. I read it many times, but I take the time to observe yourself in the surrounding world. Take the time to observe yourself in the surrounding world. Hello, Richard Denton. Richard Denton just came from Alabama. He was at the conference for Rotary, and here he is all the way from Canada.
Oh,
Richard,
my.
did you have trouble getting in today like everybody else?
No, I'm
Nope. Well, that's good.
I'm still in Alabama.
Whereabouts in Alabama?
Birmingham.
Okay. That's my home state.
Oh. Well, welcome.
I'm at the Rotary Peace Convention.
Well, I hope
conference.
that you have time to we're going to record this. It is recording and you can listen to it later. Richard Denton is one of those people who encourages us all the time.
Barbara, you said about laughter. There's another quote where he said, only humor and common sense can help deflate the old mystifying Machiavellian game. And he talked about jokes and humor and how we need to bring that in. I love that. I just love that. And he knew the power of humor, and it's really powerful. It changes the whole energy. It just like snaps it out of it.
How many times when Robert was on the 37th floor that a secretary general would come in and say, Robert, do you have a joke that I could say at the beginning of this horrible meeting that we're going to have in trying to solve war? There it is, the World Joke Book. What does that say, Sandy? That and humor around the planet. But
there we go. There we go.
There it is.
Oh, I need to put that on my shelf. Absolutely. I need that.
Well, this is in the old days when there were still biases. And so a lot of the World Joke Book is full of biases. And I would prefer not to have it on too many.
Okay. All right.
He was talking about the Swedes. Oh, those nasty old Swedes. And then they tell a joke about it. But he did make a point. When things got so bad the dictator they would make a joke about, and then they could
Yeah.
laugh about it, and then they could go
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So humor and jokes,
Yeah.
that book is something else. But anyway, as I look around, I just have so much gratitude for all of you. Each of you brings so much, and I'm so glad you share it with me on Peace Podcast, and I share it with you on our book club. So join us again June 4th. I'm Barbara Mueller, thanking you. Thank you. How can I thank Justine? Let's give her a round of applause, even though she can't hear it. Justine, your wisdom is so needed today, and thank you for being our host today. You were fabulous.
My entire pleasure and honor. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for your exquisite and elegant and needed and successful, thriving contribution to the world that you are doing, and keep it up, keep sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And everyone, please know how much I appreciate you. Justine has said it in her own words. We love you. Love
Thank you.
is the answer. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.